Year 10, myself and Greta are back for your third living room lessons in the climate change topic. What you're going to need today is your exercise book, a pen and a ruler, and your phone, okay? So we will start off, as always, with our geography memory. So what is the link between CO2 and temperature? Give one-way licks prepare for tropical storms, and give 2 problems of brownfield sites. So scan the QR code, have a go at these questions, and I'll be back in a moment. Okay, so we've spent the last couple of lessons introducing this climate change topic, having a look at the causes, both the natural and the human causes. Then we had a little look at the evidence as to how we know climate change is happening, and the fact we know temperatures are increasing, we know there is more carbon, we know there is a link. And what we're coming on to today is to have a think about the effects. So what are going to be the impacts of this? So we're going to look at it on a range of different scales. So we're going to look at the impacts in general, then we'll have a look at the impacts on the world, different parts of the world, impacts on the UK, and then the difference between kind of NICs as well, because obviously NICs play a very interesting role in climate change. Then after this lesson, we're going to have a kind of deep dive look at the impact of climate change on tropical, on coral reefs will be our next lesson, and then on tourist resorts. So we have a look at how it impacts particular things. So we're going to be spending a few lessons having a look at the problems created, all right? But your titles today are, what are the effects of climate change? Please can you all write that in now. Okay, so this map here is just predictions. It's a choropleth map showing us predictions of how global temperatures will increase by the years 2060. So over the next 40 years, this is what is expected to happen to temperatures. So obviously, as we can see, no temperatures are decreasing. No one is expected to be colder, but there's going to be varying scales in different parts of the world. Different parts of the world are going to be more or less affected by it. So what I would like you to do is copy out this table for me, which is predicted temperature rises by 2060, the most affected continent, least affected continent, most affected ocean, least affected ocean, okay? And then underneath we've got our 4 answers here, and I just want you to simply match these up into the correct box for me, okay? All right, let's go through these quickly then. So our most affected continent is clearly Antarctica. We can see Antarctica here, a huge rise in temperature that pretty much spans the whole continent. And then our least affected continent is actually North America, which is ironic because they're producing a lot of the carbon. We can see that they've got the least changes. They've got no real amounts where they're going to be heavily affected. The most affected ocean is the Southern Ocean. We can see that this area of ocean here is going to see huge increases in temperature. And the least affected ocean is the Atlantic. We can see they've got the lightest shade here. So the Atlantic Ocean, again, North America getting out of this quite lucky, aren't they? We're going to see least effect in the Atlantic Ocean. In terms of temperature increase, that's not to do with sea level rise, that's just to do with the temperature change, okay? So I've always kind of referred to in these last 2 lessons, I've referred to it as climate change. But we often hear it spoken about as global warming as well. So they are one in the same thing, but climate change, global warming, is more linking to the aspects of climate change to do with temperature increases. So to do with the fact that our temperature is increasing. Now there are obviously side effects of this increasing temperature. So what I'd like you to do is copy out the climate change definition, watch this video from the QR code, and then I want you to have a think. So if global warming is this idea that temperature is going to increase, what are going to be the 3 changes, the climate changes that happen because of this rising temperature? So watch the video, get our 3 changes in climate, and copy out the key term for me. Okay, so our 3 main increases are, there's going to be more violent storms because we're going to have warmer oceans, and we know that warmer oceans create tropical storms. There's also going to be more heat waves, so there's going to be places that are going to have more prolonged periods of high pressure, and there's going to be changes in the global pattern. So desert regions might become drier, tropical regions might receive less rainfall. We're going to see huge changes in the overall patterns of climate because of this change in temperature, all right? So, what I want us to have a think about are some of the possible consequences. So what I'd like you to do very, very quickly is copy out a table that has social effects, environmental effects, and economic effects as your 3 headings. And I would now like you to read through these different effects, and I would like you to sort them into whether they are social, economic, or environmental, but I want you to condense it. So each column has got no more than 20 words because that is a lot of information. I want you to have the key facts written down in our 3 columns, okay? Just as a reminder, when you're thinking about your economic effects, you can be thinking about things to do with kind of food production, the impact that's going to have on employment. So some of these might not straight away be obviously economic or one of the other ones, but have a little think about it, okay? So copy these out into your table and condense them down. I know you hate doing this, but please try. Okay, so here's my attempt. I found it hard to condense them as well, I'll be honest, but I did it. So social effects, too hot, so there's going to be famine. Okay, famine is when people don't have enough food. There's going to be more climate refugees, people who have to move because they can't live where they used to live. More insect-borne diseases being spread. Okay, more temperatures. High temperatures attract mosquitoes, so as the temperatures increase, there's going to be more malaria, for example. And there's going to be more extreme weather events. You could have put that in all 3 of them, to be honest, because extreme weather events have impacts on lots of things, but I've put it in social because it could be to do with people. Our environmental effects, animals can't adapt to the changes, so animals that have lived in the deserts for hundreds of years and have adapted to survive in the desert, they won't be able to adapt very quickly, so they might end up dying out. Ice sheets and glaciers will melt, so we're going to be losing those ecosystems. And thermal expansion will lead to sea level rising. So thermal expansion is this idea that as water gets hotter, it gets bigger. It's not all, sea level rise isn't all to do with the fact ice is melting and going into the ocean. As water gets warmer, that water will get bigger, which will mean there will be sea level rise because of this thermal expansion. And because of this thermal expansion, if waters get hotter, that might have an impact on animals that rely on the ocean. And economic impacts, we can grow new species of crops. Coastal places will flood more. So there's going to be a lot more losses in terms of houses, and there might be more or less rain, which again could have an impact on crops. So now I've sorted those for you, which you hopefully already did. I want you to have a go at these 3 questions in full sentences. So which of the effects of climate change is worse and why? So I want you to choose one and tell me why you think that is the worst effect. Are any of these changes positive? So are there any positive effects of climate change? And I don't just mean it's hot so we can sunbathe more. And will some areas of the world be more affected than others? So looking at this, do you think there are going to be certain regions, certain parts of the world which are going to have more impacts than others? So pause your videos and answer these 3 questions in full sentences. Okay, I'm not going to give you the answer to the first one because it's your own call. Which one do you think is the most substantial? In terms of are there any positive changes? New species of crops, so it means that people might be able to make more money because they might be able to invest in different species. And will some areas of the world be more affected than others? There will definitely be places that are more affected. As we saw on that temperature map, the USA, they're all good, aren't they? But yeah, coastal communities, because of sea level rise, they're definitely going to be affected more. Deserts and hot areas, tropical regions, the oceans, there are definitely places that are going to be more affected by it, okay? So what you should have next is, and I have put this on a sheet for you, here are some kind of major global effects that will have different impacts on different parts of the world. Because as we said, certain parts will have different impacts. All I would like you to do is, on your sheets, I would like you to annotate, match up with an arrow where these places are, so you might need a little bit of Google Maps in front of you, and then I would like you to black out the information, again more condensing, black out the waffle so you're just left with the key facts, okay? So you've either got this on a sheet or you're going to have to copy it out. Good luck. Let's go through these. So, Latin America, increasing temperatures might make rainforests turn into hot semi-arid grasslands more, there will be more droughts. So Latin America is actually everywhere from kind of Mexico down. This is all what we'd refer to as Latin America. But if we're talking kind of rainforest, that's obviously going to be more Central and Northern South America. Africa, I know you always tell me never to say Africa, but Africa's going to be affected quite similarly. So Africa by 2020, there'll be people with 75 to 200 million people will have a lack of water, growing seasons will get shorter, lakes are shrinking, fish stocks will go down. There's going to be huge impacts in Africa, one of the world's poorest parts. And the Arctic, which again is everywhere kind of in this northern part of the hemisphere, part of the very northern hemisphere, so places like Finland, Norway, Greenland, bits of Russia, bits of Alaska, Canada. Ice will melt, polar bears cannot hunt and will die. Population of polar bears is expected to decrease by 50%. Bangladesh is this little country right next to India here. So Bangladesh is somewhere that is going to be hugely affected because they have really low land. So more floods and sea level rise mean that there's going to be a lot of land loss. 1/20th of the country will be completely gone, and the salt water flowing onto land is going to have an impact on freshwater fish. The Maldives is little islands out here. So the Maldives again are islands that are really, really low, and this is going to be an example that we're going to have a look at in 1 or 2 lessons time. So this whole country could be lost. So we could lose the whole of the country. Obviously there's a massive amount of tourism in the Maldives, and there's going to be a huge amount of people who live there who have to leave. Coral reefs in Fiji, but also in other parts of the world. Coral tourism will decrease because people go to look at the coral. The colour will leach from the coral, fish will die, so we're going to lose these really important ecosystems. And then lastly for us in Europe, so obviously up here, central and eastern areas will have less rain in the summer. Health risks because there's going to be more heat waves, more forest fires. We saw that from our 2018 drought in the UK. There was more heat waves and fires, but there's also going to be increased flood risks because we've got a lot of coastal communities in the UK. The Netherlands is really, really low. So as we can see, some places are going to be affected worse, but to be honest, the whole world is going to have some problems from climate change. So next I want us to have a look a little bit more local, and you're doing basically the exact same activity again, I'm afraid. And I'd like you, on a little UK map, I have attached onto your email, or you can draw a very quick version of it out. I now want you to annotate the impacts on the UK. So put where on the UK these impacts will be. But I also want you to say whether they're positive or negative. So maybe put a tick or a cross next to them. Okay, so we'll go through these. So length of growing season will increase in Scotland is obviously a positive. So there are going to be some positives. Parts of northern Scotland which don't get as much daylight, they have lower temperatures, they're going to be able to grow things for longer parts of the year. Maybe we'll get rid of the clocks changing. Plants and shrubs will be able to grow, so parts of northern UK are going to be similar, that they're going to be able to grow different plants and shrubs that they weren't able to before. Mediterranean summers in the southeast, so we're going to get warmer temperatures in the southeast, so farmers are going to be able to grow different things. They're going to be able to diversify, grow crops, sunflowers, things which they can make more money off. So that's also a positive. Many coastal ports will be flooded, so we'll lose a huge amount of income from these ports. That's obviously a negative. There's going to be more pests and diseases in places like Cornwall. They're going to have really, really mild winters. So it means that they're not going to be seeing all of their mosquitoes and pests dying off throughout winter, which means there's going to be an increase in these pests which spread diseases. More extreme weather events, heat waves, droughts, gales, flooding and storms, that is going to affect everywhere. We're all going to see changes in extreme weather events. Greater risk of forest fires is especially going to hit northern England, and because temperatures are increasing there, they have a huge amount of fuel there. And Arctic plants. So in the northern parts of Scotland, we do have Arctic species of plants. They are going to face extinction, which is a negative again. So we've obviously had a look at kind of global effects. We've had a look at effects on the UK, but thinking about it really, even those worst negatives in the UK, we are able to bounce back from things. We've got a thriving economy, we're able to kind of make money again. Whereas there are going to be parts of the world which are going to have much greater impacts on different parts of the world. So what I'd like you to do is pause the video and watch this QR code and think about this. So the world's poorest people are the people that are going to suffer the most, okay? People in many low-income countries like Africa and Asia are going to be suffering from more drought, from more crop loss, from more flooding, and they can't afford to be losing their crops and leading to famine. It costs a lot to help people cope with these events, and their governments they don't have much money, so they're not able to help. So it means there's going to need to be more aid given. In the UK, if we start to have crop failure, the government have got huge amounts of money they can put into help. We can import from other parts of the world. We're never going to go into famine in the UK, whereas our low-income countries are going to suffer considerably more. So I want you to pause your screen, watch this video, and I want you to just summarise this information. So who is going to suffer the most? Is it the Licks or the Hicks? Okay, so brief summary of this information. Okay, And then the last thing we're going to think about is that group we always forget about, but I always save it till last for a reason, are our NICs, our newly industrialised countries. Now, obviously, they're very unique in that places like China and India are producing some of the largest amounts of carbon dioxide in the whole world. China is. However, they are still developing. They've still got a lot of people living in poverty. And through the production and manufacturing they do there, they are able to be closing that development gap. They're able to stop people living in so much poverty and make it a bit of a fairer place to be. So what I'd like you to do is, in a little heading of NICs and climate change, something like that, I want you to answer these 3 questions here. Carbon dioxide production in China is rising very fast. Why? How does China produce carbon dioxide on behalf of people in the UK? So how are they producing it on our behalf? And LIC countries produce less carbon dioxide per LIC countries produce less carbon dioxide per person. However, this does not help them escape climate change. Why? And I want you to answer these 3 questions using these words here. At some point in your 3 answers, you need to have used manufacturing, secondary industry, export, poverty, and climate. Okay? So pause your screen, have a go at these 3 questions, and we'll come back together in a moment. Let's talk through these quickly then. So carbon dioxide production in China is rising very fast. Why? Because China have got a huge secondary industry where there's a lot of manufacturing going on. And because of all of this industry, it means that their factories and their warehouses are producing a huge amount of carbon dioxide in order to help them develop. How does China produce carbon dioxide on behalf of people living in the UK? Because their manufacturing industry is enabling them to export their goods. So they produce a huge amount of goods that then get exported to higher income countries. So whilst we ain't producing the carbon dioxide, we are by default encouraging them to do so, because that exporting is helping them to develop. And LIC countries produce less carbon dioxide per person. However, this does not help them escape climate change. Why? Because LIC countries are in such poverty, it means their governments aren't able to support them if they have crop failure, if they have drought, if they have more flooding events. So they're not going to escape it just because they're not causing it. So in a way, the higher income countries and the newly industrialised countries, actually not in a way, we are creating problems for the poorest parts of the world, but we're not giving them solutions, we're not helping them. So there's a real imbalance between the kind of who is causing climate change and the effects, because whilst we are producing a lot of the things that lead to climate change, we are probably going to be affected a lot less than the low income countries who are not doing anything to produce these effects. Okay, so interesting moral dilemmas on that one. So what you should have in your book today is the most and least affected continents and oceans table, the 3 impacts of there being more heat, consequences of climate change table, your annotated world map and your annotated UK map, who will suffer the most notes, and the NICs and CO2 emission answers. So quite a bit there today, but what we've been looking at today, they're mainly a more kind of general look at the effects of climate change. And what we will be doing next is we're going to be diving, as I say, into a couple of more detailed areas. So we're going to have a look at the impact on tourism in the Maldives. We're going to have a look at the impact on coral reefs to see how climate change is having a direct impact on certain communities. Okay, well done Year 10. I'll say it again, you guys are brilliant, and I will see you very, very soon.